XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pro AV Live. I am joined today by Ollie Kenchington. Say hello, Ollie. How are we?
Hello, Ollie. Keeping with
We've had this discussion. How are you today, Ollie? Are you keeping yourself happy and safe and well?
I am, as ever, both happy and safe. And coming to you live from Somerset.
Yes, indeed. Right, thank you for everyone watching. Basically, what today is going to be is the next one in a little series that we've been doing with Ollie, where we sort of sat down and looked at each of your pieces of work recently, where we think there's something interesting to share with everyone and to talk about and to break down, and gone through them in quite a lot of detail, both the shot, the storytelling, the lighting, the camera work, all of that sort of stuff. I've been really enjoying this series, Ollie.
Yeah, me too, actually. Yeah, and it's really nice actually to have the opportunity to kind of reflect on our own work, particularly at a time where we're not getting out much. Although actually last week, my first post-lockdown or post-full lockdown shoot took place at RHS Wisley. So yeah, it was sort of slowly starting to see some green shoots emerging and
Amazing.
Filming again. But yeah, it's been nice whilst I haven't been filming to be able to kind of revisit projects and discuss them with you.
Absolutely. How did your first shoot go?
It went really well, yeah. It was a very easy one to practice the fine art of filming and keeping your distance from everyone, because it was just an interview, just a single interview with a garden designer, and then getting some B-roll of him going about his business. So yeah, a lot of longer lenses and keeping our distance. But it was a lovely sunny day, and yeah, RHS Wisley is an incredible place. I felt quite lucky because obviously it's been closed to the public, so I must be one of the few people from outside of the organisation that's got to see the garden this year, actually in full swing. And
it must be quite nice
being
in places like that with nobody else around as well.
Yeah, it was surreal. Although there's so many, obviously you can't just leave a garden in the middle of end of spring to get on with it. There's so many gardeners there and team that are doing what they normally do, but it's just no one from the public to enjoy it. So yeah, it was quite a privilege to be able to capture it.
Well, it's nice to finally hear about some things, some physical shoots rather than sort of live streaming jobs and stuff like that actually starting to happen again, which is nice.
Yeah. The drive up on the motorway was bizarre. There was literally a handful of cars, and the rest of it's just goods, lorries, trucks, loads of highways agency vans who are clearly and quite intelligently using this time to get work done on the roads whilst there's no one using them. But hardly any other cars. It was quite surreal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are we going to be looking at and breaking down today?
We are looking at a promo for a company called Ox Orgin, which is actually two guys who are private chefs. And this is like, if I wasn't a filmmaker, this would be one of my dream jobs. They get hired to come into your home, or actually quite often into homes that are being rented for holiday lets. And they will cook dinner for you, or lunch, or whatever. So they're basically on-site private chefs, and they wanted a promotional video, just a short little promo to promote them and what they do. And we actually use this as the basis for my directing colour course, which I did for MZ a couple of years ago now.
Yep, which I've watched, and I would thoroughly recommend to everyone who's watching. A really good basis of colour practice and how you can make the most of it while shooting, which is good. It's a really good course.
Well, it's a very simple idea. It was an interesting one. It was the first course that I did for MZ, and got MZ sort of said, well, what should we do? And I said, well, I'd like to do something that's relatively short. I think the whole course is only an hour and a half. I think I'm right in saying it's not very, very long. It's not like 9 or 10 hours like some of the other ones I've done. But I wanted to probe an area which doesn't get an awful lot of kind of airtime, if you like. There's it's not a particularly sexy part of filmmaking, you know, color and set design and wardrobe and thinking about developing looks for your film. I think it's something that everyone wants to think that they would learn about and do, but there aren't a huge amount of resources for it out there. So yeah, the whole thing was based around how we chose the location, how we, you know, wardrobe considerations, and right through to post-production and what we were trying to do with the color palette for the you know, promo.
But while you were making that that course, this was being made along. How separate were the two, if that makes sense? Was this an actual separate project which you just roped into that other project type thing?
Yeah, it's actually the last time that we've done that, because it's actually really difficult to
I imagine.
make an actual project and also make educational content with a BTS team at the same time. But one has
people really underestimate just how much time and in depth these educational, particularly a course of the length of that one, let alone the 9-10 hour ones that people make for MZ. The amount of time and effort and care over every single little piece of that, they are absolute attention dominating monsters, really, educational content like that.
Yeah, we basically don't do that anymore. So pretty much now, if we're making, so in fact, just before the lockdown, it was the last project I did just before the lockdown, was a similar kind of on location, behind the scenes training series about lighting for light panels. I'm an ambassador for light panels as well, and you know, that was completely, you know, made up. There was nothing there materially. We kind of wove into it a bit of a spec commercial for a non-client, just a brand that, you know, just seemed to fit our requirements for the series, so it was completely done as a spec ad, but nothing official at all, because you end up having to compromise to a certain extent, and with the guys at Ox Orgin, it was simply a case of, you know, we'd had this conversation. It's like, well, look, if you don't mind this being part of something that we're doing for something else, then that's great. We'll do it for free for you. So it wasn't, you know, it was a real project. They genuinely use this promo on their website, but it's, you know, and I didn't know them, that this was a genuine client. It's not just a mate that I did something for. But the caveat was that, you know, obviously we were going to have to be juggling several things at the same time, and you know, I think there was about 5 crew on this one, and this was down in Cornwall as well. So, and all of the crew except me were London based. So, you know, it was logistically getting people down there. We ended up staying in the property where we were shooting, which was quite fun, because it's quite incredible.
Yeah, because it's an amazing property. We'll show a photo of it in a minute, but yeah, it looks rather swanky.
Yeah, it was really nice, but yeah, so that was the compromise we had to make. So, you know, but the project itself was absolutely a bona fide, genuine project, and the amount of effort that went into it was similar to the amount of effort, as we've discussed in, you know, in other breakdowns we've already done, that goes into all of our projects. So it still rings true.
Okay, well, let's give it a watch, shall we, to start off with. Everyone watching, feel free to leave comments and stuff in the YouTube chat or on Facebook. I can see them all here, and throughout this I can bring up any questions. We can talk about the things that you guys are particularly interested in. Happy to let the flow of discussions like these be dictated by what you guys are interested in the comments and discussion. But let's start by giving it a watch.
Me and Josh have both kind of got varied tastes. Josh is probably a little bit more modern, and I'm a bit more traditional. Clean flavours, trying not to overcomplicate things, basically.
We're in Cornwall, we use fish, and we try and get sea herbs and things like that are from down here. Inspiration, as much as it comes from looking at different cuisines, it also has to come from where you are in the country.
The big satisfaction part for us is starting off as just a planned dish and an idea, and then you put the plate down on the table and just seeing their reaction, getting that direct feedback. It makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it? That's what we're passionate about.
It's a stunning location, that one, isn't it?
It
It's
is,
really
yeah.
lovely.
I can't help but always giggle at the end with the second to last shot, which was the crew had left, because I think we had the location for about 4 days, and we were only filming there for 2 or 3. I can't quite remember, but there was a day when everyone had gone and I was still there packing up stuff, and I had a little. I think I'd only recently got the. Have you still got it up there?
I've still got it up
So
here.
not
I'm
that
just
shot,
scrubbing
but
through it.
the
This
shot
shot.
before that. That was just me messing around with a DJI Spark, which I think I'd just recently got, and I was just messing around with it. So, I mean, the Spark's fun, but it's not particularly high quality. And this room was so huge. I thought, oh, I bet I could fly the drone through this room and out the window. And I chucked it in the final edit. It's a bit wonky, but there we go.
I think it works. Why not, eh? Why not?
Yeah.
So, what were the key things that you had to keep in mind when making something like that? I mean, presumably, I guess the food has to be fairly crucial.
Yeah. So I think everything comes out of that initial brief and that conversation with the client, as ever, and as we've gone into detail with on other projects. And when you're talking to clients, it's so important to really listen to what they're saying and not have any kind of preconceived notions of the film that you want to make for them. I'm always very aware of that those conversations have to steer and direct the film that we're going to create for them, and not come to it thinking, oh yeah, this is a promo. I would have loved to have done all kinds of different things, like chef's table-esque shots, and it's easy to kind of get excited about what you can do, but I think you have to really listen to what they're saying. And the conversations with these guys were fascinating, because whereas a typical chef is tied to a restaurant, they can go anywhere. I mean, I think they're actually based up near Birmingham, but they go absolutely anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, to be honest, although not now, I'm sure. One of the really crucial things that came out of those initial conversations was, do you get told what menu to create, or do you come up with it? And they said, well, it's very much similarly actually to the relationship that I needed to have with them, they have with their clients, which is conversations. If it's a special birthday party or something, and this is their favorite food, obviously they're going to incorporate that into their menu. But what they love to do, and what we captured in the interview and is in that final promo, is they talk about where they're going to be. So it was in that initial conversation that they said to me, oh, for example, when we're down in Cornwall, which they are relatively often, because obviously there's lots of holiday homes down there. When we're down in Cornwall, we'll try and kind of get the fresh catch of the day, or we'll incorporate kind of local seafood that's particularly known for that area. And that was actually the initial conversation. That was what sparked the decision to actually go and shoot it down.
I guess the menu thing gives you a bit of a communication problem as a filmmaker, though, because my normal go-to in my head for chefs and for restaurants and stuff like that would be to talk about what their food is, the menu that they've chosen, and a lot of work goes in the pro high-end chef scene to work on their menu and develop their style and all the rest of it. Whereas presumably that's very different for these guys.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, and particularly if you consider things like tasting plates, where chefs are actually trying to tell a story. People like Heston Blumenthal who literally tell a story of a specific journey or a specific thing that's happened, and they do that with their ingredients and with their meals. You are essentially losing that ability. And that ability to kind of play on themes. But what it opens up, of course, and what excites these two guys is the fact that kind of allows you to be really diverse, and you get to experiment and do things, and keep it fresh, if we'll forgive the pun, kind of every time that they're going out and doing it. So I think I got a sense from them that was what was so exciting about this, was they were getting to do what they loved, but they were getting to do it with new people every day. When I was talking to them, it resonated with me in the sense of, and I've spoken to you about this in the past about working in corporate productions, the fact that we get to work directly with the client, you get that direct feedback from them when things go well. It's not the same as freelancing for an agency and being remote from the customer. They were saying similar things to me. They loved the fact that whereas in a restaurant you're in the kitchen, the food goes out, and really you only hear from the customer if there's a complaint. Here they get that opportunity to plate it up, cook it right in front of them, put it down on the table, and hear directly from their customers what they think of the food, and obviously often that's very, very positive. They're very talented chefs. So I think that was really nice, and it gave them an opportunity to really connect with the customer, the experience of serving that food directly to them in their home or in a holiday home, and the freedom to think about where they were geographically and how they could incorporate local ingredients into their menu. And so those two concepts just resonated loud and clear, and then led us in the direction of choosing a location.
Let's talk about the location a little bit, because that location is spectacular. We've got one of your photos here.
Yeah, well, actually, this is one of the marketing photos from the agency that let this property out, and it's essentially one massive space that you walk into, and then off this one room are the bedrooms themselves. So it's a very simple building in terms of its internal layout, but it's a very large curved building that's kind of set into the hillside, and it's got its own footpath that kind of goes down to the beach, which is directly beneath it. And the key thing when we were talking was this, and they were giving me this anecdote of when they're in Cornwall, they'll find local fish and so on. Was like, that gave me this idea. It would be great if we could shoot somewhere where you could actually literally see from the kitchen to the sea. So that was just the kind of the slightly pie in the sky idea, that kind of like, well, wouldn't it be amazing if we could find that? Really not actually thinking that we would be able to find something like that. And then it's when I started kind of researching, and this is actually a company that I've used a couple of times and continue to use. They're very, very good, very high-end properties, and it's nice to work with people who that you're going to get a certain level of professionalism, and the property is going to be in a very a fit state for filming. I liken it to kind of like when you're going away on holiday. There's the Airbnb, and you might get lucky and it might be really good, and then there's the Airbnbs where they're kind of like taking some really nice pictures, but when you get there it's filthy, and access is a problem, and there's noise, and these places are all very, very highly curated, which is useful. I mean, it's a lot of money. I think.
Yeah, I imagine it's not a cheap place to hire.
No. I think this place. I mean, actually, it's not as expensive as some places, but I think this place and a lot of the places that we get through this agency are somewhere between £1,000 and £1,500 a day, which is a big old chunk of the budget. But it's also, in terms of your canvas, I mean, it's really,
well, for something like this, it's
the entire bare bones.
If you think about productions which have to build a set and all that sort of stuff, how much time and money they put into anything like that, something like this, especially somewhere where they don't have their own restaurant, which would naturally be the location in the canvas, it's crucial.
The funny thing was actually that when I gave them the details and sending out call sheets and saying, right, this is where we're shooting, they said, we've cooked there before.
Yeah.
So they were familiar with the property. They had actually been hired to cook for a family that were hiring that property for their summer holidays, I think. So that was quite useful that they knew the place, and they'd cooked in that kitchen before. But the key things for me from a kind of a location recce point of view were being able to see through and out, lots of light,
Yeah.
and obviously this place is just full of light. It's entirely glazed. It really reminded me of Tony Stark's house in the
Yeah, a little bit.
Malibu Hills. It's kind of got a similar vibe. It's
Did
Cornwall's equivalent.
yeah.
Kind of. But the other thing that really was quite high up my list, having done a lot of food stuff as well in the past, is that the kitchen wasn't wooden. And I think we've spoken about this before, but wood is very, very close, if not identical, to flesh color. And when you're shooting talent in a kitchen setting, if it's a wooden kitchen, if there are pine cabinets or too much wood of any type, they just you just lose them. They completely rescind into the background, and it becomes a very flat looking image. So I look for blacks and greys, but white's also a really good one, because it really helps show off the colors that you then put into place. So if the kitchen itself is neutral, in this case white, the colors that you choose to place there are automatically then the kind of star of the show. And obviously color was a really important factor here.
Yeah, the window helps massively with that as well, because it's not just looking at a plain white wall behind them, which could have been quite...
Now, in this particular case, we couldn't actually show the sea because the dynamic range was too much to manage to get. It was a very sunny day, so we couldn't quite. There were some shots where we managed it, some shots where we didn't. Obviously, all of the stuff at the end where the sun's going down was fine.
Oh, shots like this, yeah.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
How many you mentioned you couldn't show in this shot the sea because of the dynamic range. What other problems did you have with sunlight? Did those massive windows cause any other problems for you?
Well, I had a very good DP, a good friend of mine, Kieran O'Brien, who I've worked with a lot, and originally taught actually at university many years ago.
Oh wow!
So we've had a relationship for a long time. He's a absolutely fantastic DP, and he really understands controlling light. Like he'll turn up with his van just chock full of everything that you could for any eventuality. And I forgot, I didn't provide it to you, unfortunately. I'll try and dig it out, but there's a really nice BTS shot of me doing my piece to camera for the MZ part of this, which we shot the day after these guys. So we essentially shot the promo over a day, and then shot the MZ stuff, the piece to cameras, after that, once the guys were gone. We thought we probably didn't. It would be tempting to have them hang on and cater for the rest of the shoot. But
that'd be quite nice, wouldn't it?
Although we did eat the food that they cooked when we were filming them. We all got to sit down. It was quite nice. We all sat down and ate the food that they had cooked, and they were cooking 3 courses. So we'd be shooting, and they were like, "Well, the food's ready, guys." I'm like, cool. Everyone
stop immediately
around the table, eating this incredible, fine dining food, and then we're like, right, let's do the next bit. But yeah, there's an interesting BTS shot of me doing my piece to camera, and Kieran's actually tabletopped me with floppies all around me, because obviously a bald head and massive windows with sunlight coming in is a pretty poor combination.
Let's break that down a little bit, because I imagine some people watching might be confused by the term tabletop me with floppies. So let's
okay. So if you imagine that you're sat underneath a table, so you've got the legs of the table and the tabletop above you, like when you're a kid and you made a den underneath the table, you're essentially creating that shape with floppies. So if you've got the negative fill is the if I pair this right back, so this is a process known as negative fill. So you're using a black surface to stop light from reflecting onto your subject. So normally that would just be one side. So you might have like a white wall or something over here, and there's too much spill kind of coming back and bouncing onto your subject. So you would use a floppy or black wrap or whatever it might be, just to kind of cut out that light and stop it from bouncing back. So any black surface that's used for that is known as negative fill. Tabletopping it essentially means that you're doing that on two sides and above. And that meant that the one on my right-hand side was stopping direct light coming in through the windows and hitting me on this side. And then Kieran's own artificial lights were then the ones that were actually modeling my face. The top to stop any reflections coming down and top and hitting my big shiny bald head. And then on the other side to do actually what traditionally your negative fill would do on that fill side to stop it bouncing back. And that completely isolated me other than at the front and behind. And behind we had quite a key feature actually of this location, which is the big local stone wall, which essentially cuts the whole building in half. And then obviously to the front where you've got the camera, you've got the lights coming in, and you can be very controlled about the final look. I think there is a shot of me holding a chart from that piece to camera. Yeah. So there you can see that there's no harsh reflections. You've got that key side of my face, which is from the artificial lights from the LEDs that Kieran was using, and then all of the light that's actually behind, and there's a little splash of sunlight on the wall there by the yellow cushion. That's all natural light just coming in and fitting. So the rest of it is all just equalizing with your artificial lights to make sure that the balance of the exposure is there. But it's one of those things that it's obviously far more complex than if it had been an overcast day. If it had been completely overcast, we could have got a very similar look with very little work. But as it was such bright, harsh sunshine, we had to control it a lot more.
Sure.
We also had outside the window, so what sunlight was coming in, we had a massive trace frame just diffusing the sunlight as it came in.
You can see it in this
you
shot,
just
right?
see there.
Yeah. So I guess that's great for taking off some of those really harsh backlights and stuff on people. Yeah.
So this was actually the interview that we shot with the guys. We never actually cut to this in the final edit. We just used the sound from it. But you can see they're essentially sat. They're sat in the shade that frame is giving them, and it's just taking away a stop and a half or so of that light, that harsh sunlight that would otherwise be hitting them, and it's just diffusing it.
Okay, we're getting a couple of questions coming in, which is good. So Jay asks, how did you control the lighting in the daylight? We've already answered that one, I think, sufficiently. He's also asking, how much creative/shooting input do you typically provide? Which is one I'm a little bit confused about, because presumably all of it, right?
Well, in this case, I kind of know where it's coming from, because in this particular case, all of it, because these are two chefs who know absolutely nothing about making a film. They just knew that they wanted one, and so we 100% are responsible for the creative from that point of view. Yeah, I understand what they mean, though. I mean, traditionally with most normal kind of regular projects, your client normally comes to you with some kind of semi-formed creative brief, and normally there's some kind of marketing team there that's kind of directing it to a certain extent, and you kind of input where you feel there's need for that input, but it's certainly a more of a collaboration. On this particular one, it was entirely the creative was developed by us, which is another reason why I thought it would be very suitable for the MZ for our directing colour course, because it meant that we could make sure that everything that we wanted to illustrate for directing colour we could use. And if, in fact, I was prepared to kind of shoehorn in a few things, but in fact we really didn't need to. This was the perfect project to show off the approach to kind of weaving colour into it, because coming back to I got diverted a bit there, so apologies, but the original conversation we're having, not only did they come out of this kind of conversation about where they're cooking and their ethos and their passion for local ingredients, we also talked about the name. So I was like, well, I always think that's quite a useful way of getting to the crux of a brand, because they often have these conversations when they're trying to think of a name for the company. So I was like, well, why an origin? What's the meaning behind that? and butchery was quite a big part. I think one or other, I can't remember if it was Josh or the other chap, they had a kind of a background in butchery, and they the kind of the fresh meat produce side of things was kind of how they got into chefing, and the origin part of it was because they like to use ingredients that originate from the local kind of area where they're working. So when they were talking about the types of styles of cooking and their kind of ethos towards it, there was this recurring theme about organic, local ingredients, and as we were talking, the kind of the color palette almost kind of created itself, because we were talking about being by the sea. They were talking about grass-fed cattle, free-range organic produce, and this kind of earthy sort of a bit kind of like this surf and turf idea, basically. This surf and turf idea kind of was formulating in my head, and I thought it'd be great if we could get a location where we could see the sea. And when I saw this place and I thought, oh my God, we can see the sea directly out the window. That's amazing. And then I saw this massive local stone wall that's the backdrop. So this whole thing is like polished concrete floor. It's all white, apart from this one wall that's this really deep umber color, this local stone, which actually is literally from the beach below. So they were using the stone that had kind of crumbled down into the sea and was kind of on the beaches down, just down from where the property was. They had used that stone. So when we say local, we don't mean it was from 30 miles up the road. I mean it was from there. And I think there's some shots I might have sent you of the stone.
These ones.
There we go. So this stone here is all piled up. It's all along the beach, and there's these like big kind of weird bits that are kind of jutting up, and it has been used to create this big, massive stone wall in the middle of the property, and it's literally the only building
this
material
wall
that
you
has
can see behind
there you
him
go.
there, and the one behind you in your piece to camera.
Yeah. It's far more yellow in this shot, actually, just because of the mixed color temperatures between me being lit and the background. It's actually a more reddy kind of umber color.
I guess that's
more close to it. So that for me, when I saw that and I saw the combination of being able to see the sea out the window and then these warm, earthy colors in the wall, I was like, well, this is too good to be true, really. Perfect complementary, plays on the whole classic orange and teal kind of motif. You had the kind of the turf human element and the warm colors from that, and you had the sea and the fish and the produce from there. So literally this location just ticked every single box, basically. When I discovered it, it was a no-brainer. So what we wanted to then do, once we kind of had the bare bones of the location fitting the kind of the needs of what we had in our mind as a kind of a color look for the film, was then to make sure that was followed through. And this is where you need a little bit more thought. You need to make sure that there aren't things that are just kind of going to crop up. And it could be sort of mundane things, like they brought a few Tupperware containers with some of their ingredients when they came down that had like green lids, and so there was times where just before we were shooting, like, we're going to have to move these out of shot. We can't use this bottle. I think they had a sauce bottle with a green top on it when they were saucing the plate. And I was like, this doesn't fit. And we had to be quite strict with the palette that we're trying to create, because it affects the mood. And if there's a color that's not part of your established palette, there has to be a justification for that, because it will be noticed, because it stands out. So we were very strict about paring it back. So it literally had to fall within these blues, or it had to fall within these warm, earthy colors. So I had to kind of, in pre-production, talk to them about, okay, what color are your I want to say pinny, but
apron.
Thank you.
I think apron is more a term chefs prefer than pinny.
It's like they have a different word for everything. Apron. So I was like, well, what color are your aprons? They're like, Josh's is black and mine's dark blue, and I was like, where do you get them from? So they gave us the details for the catering shop where they get all of their aprons from, and I went on there and was like, right, they've got brown versions. Let's get you a new matching brown aprons. So it's just part of the kind of the art direction essentially. And then the other big thing, of course, was then the food. What were they going to be cooking? And we knew that we wanted it to be fish. But other than that, there was quite a lot of free reign as to what we were going to do. So I just talked to them about what would you typically kind of want to do? What have you been doing recently? What's in season? And then cherry picked from that ingredients that fell within our palate. So we had things like butternut squash. There was the blood orange that they served with, I think it was the pudding. I can't remember. And then just to throw little bits of accent in there, which kind of sort of actually gave us a bit of a triadic color theme. We had the pink, there's this kind of vivid magenta of the rhubarb, which was in season at the time. So forced rhubarb. This was the end of February when we shot this. So forced rhubarb was just hitting peak kind of season for them. And forced rhubarb, as opposed to unforced rhubarb, is particularly bright and vivid pink. So we decided that would be like an extra color, so that it didn't end up being bland. You've got to be careful when you're paring down color palettes that you don't end up with it being so kind of bland across the whole thing that you lose the impact of it if it's every single frame is exactly the same. So you need to have a couple of little colors, and triadic color schemes are where you essentially take a color wheel and you split it into thirds, and at the end of each point you've got a triadic color that bits together. This wasn't quite that, but what we had was a traditional kind of complementary colors of the orange and teals, if you like, and then just taking off at a right angle to that the magenta. So using that as a kind of a thing. So really just thinking about how do the ingredients, the things that they want to cook, how do they fall within how we might create a color palette, and using things like the rhubarb to kind of pick up certain accents. And then so that allowed us, when we were filming them, preparing and cooking the ingredients, to kind of use the white, use the skin tones, use the aprons, use the food, and the varying intensities, like the blood orange and the butternut squash, they're much more saturated than the kind of the dark browns of the aprons. So it kind of allows you to operate within a relatively limited hue, but then you're using that depth of intensity to kind of separate objects out.
Okay, let's start breaking down some of the particular shots, shot by shot, shall we? I suppose before then we should probably talk about camera and lenses and some of the equipment side of things. So let's bring this behind the scenes shot up, which I think is the only photo I've got where you can see the equipment really. But this was C200, I believe, was it?
And do you know what? It's interesting you should say that. I can't remember if... Oh, that would be, yeah. So the behind the scenes stuff was wasn't shot on C200, but everything for the actual promo was shot on the C200. So I couldn't quite tell looking at that. It was confusing me because that's actually Kieran's sticks there. But yeah, that's my rig. So most of it I shot on the shoulder. It's an Arri shoulder rig, and using the C200, and the whole thing was shot. The whole thing was shot cinema raw light. So I think it was all 25p as well. So it was all 12-bit 4K DCI. Mostly on the shoulder, some of it on the sticks. And what else were we using? Lenses? Canon Cinema Primes. So we had a box of the CNE Cinema Primes, and I think some of the stuff I got on the beach, which I think I only ended up in the MZ course. Like there's like a dog on the beach that we filmed and stuff. That was mostly on their photo lenses. So I think we had a 70 to 200, the f2.8, and we were also using the fantastic 100 to 400 mil Canon zoom, which is an absolute beast, but pin sharp, even wide open at the long end at 400 mil. So we used a lot of that stuff. I even actually cut together a little separate, like silly little short film called The Detectorist, just out of some B-roll that I got of this guy who just turned up on his motorbike, grabbed a metal detector off the back and started sweeping the beach. And he happened to fit he had the same color like top on as the color of the rocks all around him, and I just quickly grabbed a few shots of him. But yeah, those
wouldn't have made
lenses.
much sense in the middle of the chef's film, though.
No, it's a standalone piece.
Right, shall we watch it again, maybe? But I'll keep the volume down so that we can talk over it, and then I can scrub backwards and forwards a little bit, and we can pause and go back and do all that fancy jazz so that we can break down shots. So let me know if you want to stop on anything, but let's go for it. So these opening shots are drones, presumably.
Yeah, again, this was just stuff I shot with the Spark, which I didn't really intend on using, but I'm pleased I did in the end. So, beetroot, yeah, that was another one.
Yeah, nice red tones from beetroot, obviously.
And the beanie here. So the beanie that was being worn, I actually have forgotten this chap's name. If you just back up a little bit. We were chatting. It was when they first got there. Actually, this was one of those things that we didn't think of in advance. We thought about the white shirts that they're wearing and the brown aprons was all kind of like, part of our wardrobe considerations. But it turned out that this chap always wore a beanie when he was cooking. It was like his thing. And I was like, oh right. He's like, yeah, I've got hundreds of different beanies. I was like, oh okay. And I said, oh, what have you got with you? Because I think the one he turned up in was like bright green or something. I've got this one. And he had this kind of ochre coloured beanie. I was like, oh great, perfect. And there's also another shot where he's got this skull, this orange skull tattoo, which again, obviously, I didn't make him have just so that it fit within the colour palette.
Yeah. That one.
Yeah, and I just thought, I don't know. So that was just about, serendipity, really, just finding shots whilst they're preparing the food. Audio plays quite a big part, actually, in this whole thing. There's a real emphasis, our sound recordist, on this. Tom was very consciously getting all of this. He was very careful whilst I was filming. So the whole time that I was filming on the shoulder, he was there getting the sounds, like when he's banging the sieve, making like the breadcrumb.
I mean, shots like this without any audio to go along with it, they're just nowhere near as effective at all. No,
not at all. No. So everything's kind of falling into that palette. The oil that we had on the table, when they're plating things up. That you get that shock of pink that comes in. It also kind of fitted quite nicely with, again, just finding things like the fish. When he moves that fish down onto the table. So that's one of those kind of choreographed shots. A lot of it was completely incidental. They had, you can't really kind of say, oh, just hold off for 20 minutes, because then something burns. They just cooked. But this was one of the times I was like, look, he was prepping these fillets. I was like, could you just slide that onto the kitchen counter in front of me? And actually, that's been quite heavily worked in the grade, because actually the colour on that fish wasn't as vivid as that. It was blue, but it wasn't anywhere near as saturated as that. And I really wanted that fish to kind of really, really stand out, and particularly when
you want it to link to this opening shot of the scene, and stuff like that.
Exactly. So that's where the huge benefit of the fact that it was 12-bit raw. There's actually a huge amount of saturation that's been pushed into that. It wasn't a very saturated color, and that's one of the things that will expose a weak codec more than anything else when you're grading. Pushing colors around, you can actually move even 8-bit 420 codecs a fair amount before you start to see the artifacting. But if you're taking something that's low saturation and then ramping that up and trying to bring that intensity up of its natural color, that's almost impossible to do with something that's kind of a low bit depth and low chroma information in it. So having these 12-bit cinema raw light files meant that we could in that particular case really push it up and get what we were wanting.
Absolutely.
Which was a huge help.
It's so subtle as well, because often when people talk about color in the way that you talk about color with this project, the resulting film ends up being about the color, whereas this isn't about the color in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's actually quite I would, if I just watch this in isolation, would describe it as quite a low contrast and low saturation sort of piece. If we scrub through all these shots, they are quite low contrast and low sat. And yet color's just as important.
Exactly, and I think the overall kind of aesthetic for the whole thing, by thinking about these things at various stages as you're going through, when you get to the end, they're embedded into the look of the film. You don't have that situation where you get to the color grading, like, right, what color look are we going for? But it then allows you to kind of think cohesively at the end about how are we considering this. One of the reasons that I wanted the saturation to be relatively muted was because I wanted it to feel overall quite earthy and quite kind of a bit rough and ready, because the guys themselves, they're not sort of prissy Michelin-starred chefs. They're real, sleeves up guys, and I didn't want it to feel overly kind of pretty and too kind of Wizard of Oz. It is quite muted, but that was actually something that's kind of been done as a whole at the end. The actual, obviously, as you can imagine, the material itself was very saturated, and that's kind of a decision to kind of pare it back a little bit, and just kind of let the angles kind of play out a little bit. So it's nice. I think in context it works quite nicely. Sometimes when I take frame grabs from these and show them in isolation, I actually bring the saturation up, because you then lose that kind of you lose that context. So on its own, they do look kind of.
I was just thinking that actually
they look below saturation.
Yeah.
So
because when we show stills like that, you're right. You have brought up the saturation there.
Yeah, exactly. So of course that's a frame grab. Yeah, so that's actually a frame grab from a presentation. That I can't remember what it was for, but anyway, exactly. And so that's far more like it actually looked, basically. But that was just a creative thing. That was just something that we decided to do at the end. But
sure.
I think tying it all together is important. I think people worry about how do I tie these things together, but if they're just thinking just incrementally as you go through the process, and certainly creating mood boards, color boards at the beginning when you're in pre-production, similar to what I showed when we did that breakdown of our mental health nursing film with you a couple of weeks ago. I think it becomes embedded. It's just part of what you're doing, and it then means that it's just there. It's not something that you're having to kind of pull out. That fish shot, that was one of the few times we had to kind of pull out that color, because we didn't expect it was going to be so dull. I thought it would be really vibrant. I was thinking of mackerel or whatever, and it just wasn't quite there. So it means that you're in a good place to kind of deal with those, not problem shots, but the things that don't quite go as you thought they were going to go.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? As to how much you try and put those colours in person and how much you adjust them in the grade. I mean, as a colourist, are you often tempted to do things in the grade to make things that are out of your control match the color palette more? I mean, I suppose this tattoo is a perfect example of that. It would be relatively straightforward to change the color of that bright orange skull in Resolve.
And in fact, I have. Yeah. So that's a really good example. That orange, that basically looks more or less in terms of saturation as it was, but I've used a hue versus hue curve to actually pull that round, and then I've done a split screen image wipe between whatever was preceding it. I think it was the next sort of shot before that was a similar vivid orange was the butternut squash. So I've actually looked at those two on the vectorscope and made sure that they
was it actually this one?
Yeah, so maybe it's the orange on the oranges then. So I've actually looked at those on the vectorscope and made sure that they are in the same area. So that's kind of what I mean is we're conscious of these things as we're shooting them, so that if we do have to manipulate in post, we're talking about small adjustments. If I had shot this just thinking, oh, that's cool, a skull tattoo, and it was a green skull or a blue skull or something else, and then in post like, well, let's try and really ramp it down. Because it was 12-bit raw, I probably could have done, but it's for me, and I've said this a number of times, it's about you want to end up with a digital negative from the camera that's so close to what you're actually trying to create that the amount of effort that you're putting into getting it where you want it is minimal. And that then allows you to really think about the rest of the image. I mean, color grading to me is most powerful as a mechanism for creating depth, for drawing the viewer's eye, and for creating a subconscious feeling towards what you're looking at, whether that's overall saturation or about like the period of the piece or whatever it might be. Those things are really powerful aspects of color grading. What's not powerful about color grading is fixing something that was the wrong color, or fixing a light that was tinted that shouldn't have been, or you didn't white balance properly, or you've put them in yellow or purple aprons, and then you thought, oh Christ, that doesn't really work very well. So that's not powerful color grading. You can go, hey, look, I can change the color of this tattoo from purple to orange, and people go, wow, oh my god. It's great fodder for little short kind of snippet tutorials, but actually as a filmmaker that's trying to be as efficient as possible and focus on the story above all else, and how, as I say, those important things about color in terms of depth and perception of the image and where you're looking in the image, and the texture of the image. Those are things that I want to be spending time thinking about, not correcting things that I haven't thought about earlier on.
Absolutely. Right, is there anything final we want to talk about with this piece before we wrap up?
I have one more scoot through it, and I'll just see if there's anything else relevant. I'm trying to keep this relatively focused around color,
Sure.
And not kind of, there's all kinds of incidental bits and pieces and anecdotes. But for example, in the MZ opening monologue in my MZ course, I'm doing this piece to camera walking along the beach, and I'm doing it in my slippers because in the morning a wave came out of nowhere and completely soaked my shoes. If you go back, actually, just go back to that previous shot again of him filleting the fish there. Things like that blue bag. I said they turned up with a number of things that I'm like, oh, that doesn't quite fit. But they also turned up with a couple of things that did. And so this bag, I can't was in it. I think they had some of the veg in it. I was like, well, let's just tuck that to the side, because I was conscious that this image was like, you had the wooden chopping board, obviously he's got his skin, you've got the ochre beanie, you've got the wall behind. There was a little bit of blue with the painting that's on the wall in the background, but there wasn't enough of that blue. I was conscious of the fact that we hadn't managed to capture the sea because of the dynamic range of this shot. So literally just moving in that bag was just a last minute, let's just grab that and put that there, just to kind of balance it out. And I've placed it in the bottom right corner to balance with the big expanse of wall, and the only other place you've got that blue, which is up in the top left of the corner. So you kind of do these things as you go. As you start to think about these things, they become second nature to you, and you start to kind of just weave them in, which is kind of where you want to get to, really.
Absolutely.
The orange flames, this blue sign.
I love that the sign is blue to link back to the sea. The fish is blue, the sea is blue, the sign to the beach is blue.
It's a bit sort of slap in the face, isn't it? It's like, here's a beach, here's a sign that says to the beach, and it's blue. But it works. I couldn't resist when I saw that.
I think because the rest of the film is so sort of understated and low contrast and natural, but I think things like that, it didn't leap out to me at first viewing that, oh yeah, of course the sign's blue,
Yeah, and I think from memory there was a little bit of a hue versus hue going on that sign as well. It was maybe a little bit sort of more dull, or certainly some saturation bringing it up. But and this shot, the greens, again, I've dialed those greens back quite a bit because they don't fall in our color palette. So I've pushed a little bit of red into them, desaturated them, and allowed that color to mainly come from the red sort of sand and stone and beach, and then eventually when you get over the water. So it's not rocket science at all. I think it's just, hopefully, if nothing else, I just want people to maybe just start to realize that these things are just simple things that you can think about in advance, and they certainly shouldn't be afterthoughts, because it's very difficult to do anything about it afterwards.
Like doing a live stream with both wearing the same kind of color red top, I've just noticed. There we go.
You know what? I specifically bought this coloured. So I think this is the first time I've worn this since I did. So at the moment I'm editing my latest MZO course, which is a colour correction with DaVinci Resolve course. It's going to be another like eight or 9 hour. But I specifically bought this top to do it because we filmed it in here in my studio, which is the first time that we filmed one of the MZ ones in my actual own suite. And as you can see, obviously we've got the brick wall behind us. We've got I bought those tungsten bulbs as well. And then the main wide shot, I don't know if I've even, I think I've got somewhere like a frame grab from it, but it's the main piece to camera has got quite a lot of the kind of the desk. We have black desk, we've got the grey pigment-free walls because it's our colour suite. Yeah. So actually deliberately kind of framing it so we had the warm colours, I'm in orange, and then most of the frame, which kind of comes out to the side, we've then pushed blue into to kind of give that balance. So, you know, even this shirt was purchased specifically for, in fact, a very similar color palette that we did for this particular project. So
yeah, somebody's just pointed out in the comments that it's a similar. It's not the same top. Yep. That's a jumper, isn't it? But similar idea there.
Yeah, nothing wrong with putting a little bit of thought into your wardrobe. The irony.
But for clarification, we didn't plan to wear the same color top.
No. Well, see, this would irk me, the fact that yours has got more blue in it than I would ideally want. See, I'd like to move that around. I want to Hue versus Hue you right now.
I could probably try, but I don't think I'm going to live.
Where's that button? I've got my control surface here. Yeah, I actually hate shopping for clothes. I'm 6'2", size 12 feet. Nothing ever fits me. Tiny, skinny little legs and a big fat body. But sometimes you just gotta buy the jumper that's the right color or the shirt that's the right color for what you're going to be filming.
It's nice to know that even with those limitations, you're still letting color dictate.
Even with those hideous disabilities, he's still able to succeed.
Not what I meant. Oh dear.
Bold. Oh my God, the list is endless. How does this
work? Before we get too off track, thank you so much for that. I think that was a really good little breakdown of the project. I love doing things like this because we can talk about equipment till the cows come home, and obviously we do a huge amount on this channel. But every now and again, I think it is really nice to take a step back and focus on some of the creative sides of it. So thank you so much for everyone who has been watching and leaving comments in the thing that's really useful. And thank you so much for your time, Ollie.
Pleasure. Always my absolute pleasure to talk to you, Carl. Thank you very much for having me again.
No problem at all. We will be back with more streams very soon. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and have a great day. Right.
Am I still on screen up in the top right, or is that just Skype?
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information,